Hello everyone. So welcome to Host by John. So today I'm John. I'm the host for the show today. So today's the session is not look like another conversation. It's a deep dive into the future of quality, operational excellence, and the leadership in the age of AI as well. So we are honored to have with us globally recognized thought leaders in quality and Lean Six Sigma. So please join me in welcome Govind. So Govind have a long profile. So he's a body of knowledge chair for the design and construction division. He also be the author of the ASQ certified Six Sigma Yellow Belt Handbook. He also be the co-author of ASQ certified Six Sigma Green Belt Handbook. He also contributing author to the Lean Handbook. He's a co-author of ASQ TR2 2024 Cost of Quality. And the last one will be very long. He also be the former of S1 chair at the US start to ISO TC 176 on quality management. Again, welcome Govind. So hello Govind, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. Thanks for that kind introduction, John. As we were talking prior to this podcast, I don't want anyone to be fooled by the number of credentials in my bio. I'm still a humble learner. On a daily basis, there are new things that come up. I have to continue to learn them and be adaptable to those circumstances. So we are all learning. Our life itself is a continual learning process. So that is how it goes. There are two additional things that I did not put in the bio, maybe worth mentioning. One is um, for the construction quality, there is going to be a ASQ Construction Quality Manager Handbook that will be launched during the ASQ World Conference. I'm the lead author for that handbook, and I have a co-author and 8 other contributors from the industry, all averaging 20 years of construction experience. So this would be the first unified construction quality handbook to our knowledge, published in the world. So anyone in the construction industry in the quality, this would be the go-to reference, not just for writing the exam, also to keep it as a shelf reference anytime to pull up from the shelf and get themselves updated. So that is coming up. And I'm also involved in I work for a data center industry in a cloud organization. Some of you might have seen through my profile. uh, since I'm not representing that company in today's podcast, I'm not saying the name of the company. But Our organization, along with many of our peers and our suppliers, we have created a working group for data center excellence. It's called the Data Center Excellence 9000. It's a quality management system requirements standard, which we are starting to develop for all the data center equipment suppliers, starting with the infrastructure equipment suppliers. And this is going to be published. The draft will be published in September, and the fully published standard will be available in March of 2027. And so I want your listeners to know, because there are a lot of data center operators in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. They might benefit from this standard as well. So those are the two additions I didn't put in the bio, which I'm actively involved.
Yeah, thank you, Govin, for your input. So, I super admire you because every time we meet, from the last time we met in ASQ, the World Conference, you always bring the new thing to me, right? And now you also add two more inputs in your profile. You have a very long profile already, so now two more, right? So again, Govin, welcome to the show, and it's very honor to have you here. So I believe that I do believe that our attendance here very honored to have you here, and
Thank you.
you guys, we have around 60 minutes to have the discussion with Govind. And after that, we have 30 minutes for Q&A. So please put your question in the chat box. So I will collect the question and consolidate and ask Govind at the end, right? So the first thing first, Govind, well, we also know that you are the expert in Lean Six Sigma and you have very long time to work in the Lean Six Sigma. So the first one, I would like to ask you about the evolution of Lean Six Sigma, right?
Mhm.
So over the past 3 decades, so how has Lean Six Sigma fundamentally evolved? So what's your point of view, please?
Yeah, definitely. It has gone through quite a number of evolutions. The fundamentals remain the same. The fundamental doesn't change. but how it has morphed and adapted to the industry changes is worth mentioning. Like any other framework, the initial emphasis is usually on the tools, because people understand the tools very readily. So in terms of lean tools, you have 5S, visual management, Kanban, just in time, single minute exchange of dies, all these concepts on the lean, that came from the Toyota production system, including total predictive maintenance, all those very useful tools that came from the Toyota production system in the lean. So there was a greater emphasis on the application of the tools and benefiting short-term benefits from those application of the tools, lean. And the lean organization that implemented lean concepts, they pride themselves as a lean organization. They don't let any of the Six Sigma team to come anywhere near them. Six Sigma is a separate organization. You stay in your own lane. I am a lean organization. I have a different lead and a team of people who support the lean. We are separate organization. That was the mentality back then. So even I can remember from some of my organization, I would put myself more of a Six Sigma side rather than on a lean side, because that's how my training started, and I upgraded myself to the lean concepts. So the lean team had a different level of influence than the Six Sigma team. So they never led the Six Sigma team to come any closer to the lean team because they don't want to be their credits. They don't want to share the credit of any of their successes, right? So that was a very narrow, siloed mentality back then. Here is my lean kingdom. I will operate separately and all those things. And Six Sigma, they just thrived in their own space on, having their own Six Sigma training, training people on yellow belt, green belt, black belt, having a master black belt. That ecosystem, they just coexisted in the organization in two different parallel entities. And so that was the initial start. Then, lean provides effectiveness. Effectiveness means the ability to achieve the goals. You set a goal, how effective you are able to achieve the goals. Lean provides that by elimination of the waste, by reducing the improving the cycle time, all those things that comes with the lean, as an overall value proposition. Whereas the Six Sigma focused on variation reduction, right? That is the main approach on the Six Sigma in terms of design for Six Sigma or the operational Six Sigma DMAIC. So it focused on variation reduction. So the Six Sigma provided efficiency. So the effectiveness and efficiency was decoupled in the beginning. So the team that dealt with effectiveness were separate, and the team that was dealing with efficiency was separate. Maybe they don't necessarily work on the same thing together. So you are making things, some of the things effective, not necessarily efficient. And Six Sigma was working on something to make something efficient, but it is not effective to start with. So if something is not effective, you cannot make it efficient. So the effectiveness comes first before efficiency, right? So people didn't know the relationship between that. So when you need, in order for the lean tools to work effectively, you need a foundational quality management system. If you didn't have an end-to-end enterprise quality management system with formalized policies, documented processes, work instructions, tool aids, all that thing were not there, it will not be possible to do set up a lean lean setup on top of that to make it effective. So you could bring the lean while you are developing the overall quality management system, but without QMS, you cannot do the lean effectively. So that relationship still exists there. And you cannot stop at just effectiveness. You need efficiency. So you need to stack the Six Sigma on top of that in order to bring the efficiency. So standardization, effectiveness, and efficiency. So you can look behind me. There is a library rack right there, right? This is not a wallpaper. This is the actual library rack with 330 books right behind me. And these shelves are arranged in that same order. The bottom shelf here is quality management system, Lean, and Six Sigma. It's arranged in the same order. Foundation, governance, effectiveness, and efficiency. So that logic has to follow. So that integration happened, over time, on the Lean Six Sigma side, from very tool-based thinking to combining the Lean and Six Sigma, that is the effectiveness and efficiency, then realizing that you need the foundational enterprise management to have the foundation to stay all these things. Without the foundation, you can't have a superstructure. So that was added. So that pyramid of the three layers, QMS, Lean, and Six Sigma, eventually came to shape. From that point onwards, where is it going now? So yeah, go ahead, ask John. I'm going to talk about where is it going.
Yeah, and when I hear from your sharing, it's like I read the whole handbook that you wrote, right? Yeah, so you bring us back to basic, back to the very foundation of Lean Six Sigma. And it's not only a lot of people know that Lean and Six Sigma is separately. And thank you for your sharing. Lean is effectiveness and Six Sigma is efficiency. So combining Lean and Six Sigma is a perfect way. So, Govind, I know that you work in Lean Six Sigma and you deep dive in the Six Sigma world for a long time, right? So, if you compare early 2000s versus today, so what are the biggest shift in the focus?
Yeah, so the earlier focus in the Six Sigma implementation, I was a corporate Six Sigma master black belt, about 15, 20 years ago, myself. So the entire emphasis was on, setting up the huge infrastructure, for the entire corporation, training people on, green belts, yellow belts, green belts, black belts, and assigning them different project at a different level of their level of competencies, and presenting it to the leadership on the successes made in the project. So while we were doing that, we did have the project selection matrix in terms of, not all projects are chosen as a Six Sigma projects. It has to have some level of strategic importance, operational importance, cost saving opportunities, and learning opportunities for people at at the beginning level, which is like a yellow belt and green belt, right? So from that point onwards, it was very skill based activities. People with Six Sigma statistical skills. More importantly, they were considered very important, back then. So because they can contribute very effectively to the decision making process that happens throughout the DMAIC process. They can apply the statistical skills. So that was the level of emphasis and importance back then. And from there to what I see now here, now the tool capability and the knowledge of statistical thinking is not as important, because artificial intelligence has democratized that knowledge to everyone. If you go into the Google Gemini and on the guided learning, you put inside the menu called guided learning on the right and the bottom, you can ask questions, you can gradually learn. You cannot become a Six Sigma expert overnight. However, you will become enough, knowledgeable enough to be able to handle day-to-day operational problem solving, using Six Sigma by just self-learning. So now the knowledge has been democratized. So now the focus has moved into, the organizational learning and the wisdom and cultural, alignment, and how the organization is made ready to face the more resilient, more turmoil based world. So we will talk about it. Things like how the geopolitical situation has totally changed the world. The challenges with respect to availability of the energy, the raw materials, proprietary raw materials from certain regions which are not available in other places. So all this has changed the equation. So the not just the Six Sigma, even the Lean has to revisit the body of knowledge, has to think how, it is not just sufficient to reduce the waste. Organization need to move fast. The organization need to be nimble, adaptable, resilient. And once the process is fully established, how are they going to be robust against all the variables that are confronting them? Robustness is basically the process stability against all the variables. When all the variables in the process change, can the process still consistently provide the output without large variation? That is the robustness, right? And resiliency is to be able to bounce back, like you are bouncing back after going to Vietnam, being able operational within 8 hours span, right? That's resiliency. You built it by yourself. It's your muscle memory. So how are you going to build that muscle memory for your organization? You have a geopolitical situation, political unrest, environmental impact like typhoon, or scarcity of raw material, energy shortage, local regulatory restrictions. All this, how are you able to still be resilient and be able to deliver your output to your customers, be it products or services? That is where the new evolution of the lean has to move. Pivoting away from the traditional body of knowledge and to more resilience focused approach, speed and resilience focused approach, right? So again, I want to say the foundations, it's not changing, but how we apply the Lean Six Sigma in the today's world context is going to change.
Yeah, thank you, Govind. So during your sharing, I feel that your energy, your ambition, right? Your motivational for the Lean Six Sigma in the past 3 decades is never changed, right? You can talk, I can think that you can talk maybe one day continuously for Lean Six Sigma. And one thing you mentioned is really right, is religion, right? And now how can you bounce back after a lot of time, a lot of change? And now the focus, you mentioned a lot of things, right? So we can focus in the organizational change for the learning, a lot of things. And especially now we are in the VUCA and the tuna, right? A lot of things that's changed so much so quickly, right? So it's a lot of keywords you mentioned. And real quick, if a CEO in 2026 asks you, why should I invest in Lean Six Sigma? So what's your answer?
Absolutely. See, the whether you call it as a Lean Six Sigma or through the intent saying that you have an improvement initiative that helps the organization to become faster, more agile, adaptable, and resilient, you call it that way. There is always a need for this kind of improvement in any organization. You can call it as a lean, you can call it as a process re-engineering, you can call whatever you want, by the name. But the intent of the organization or the expectations of the organization to become, they need to innovate faster, turn around new products sooner, build quality at the source, reduce the operational failures. Once the product is turned over, be it a data center or any commodity product, you cannot afford to have failures once product is shipped to the customers. Being nimble, being agile, being able to confront all the variables that are outside of your control and still be robust. All these needs are not going to go away because these are fundamental needs for running a business, right? Maybe we did not give enough importance for these things before because we didn't encounter 100-year pandemic. We never encountered it. We never thought the world would become, concurrently with multiple wars simultaneously. We never imagined that situation, and the industry is never prepared for that scenario because the world enjoyed a very long period of peaceful period. They did not anticipate, or even if you had said to someone, look, imagine a use case where there are multiple wars going on in different regions of the world. What would happen to you if you are energy constrained? People would think that it is a very abstract idea and just discount it. No, that's not going to happen. Let's not worry about hypothetical cases. But those hypothetical cases are real cases today. So organizations have to prepare for it. You cannot discount any scenario as a black swan event and just leave it. Okay, let's not worry about these things. So you need to put some level of consideration, right? You mentioned the VUCA, world, right? So you need to think about it and have a consideration in your overall enterprise business management design.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Govind. So you share a lot of things and a lot of knowledge. I see that the depth of the knowledge and the bunch of the knowledge you mentioned about the body of knowledge, right? And a lot of people can learn a lot from you. So today I provide the operational excellence training, specialized in the strategic thinking and hosting country for maybe the biggest banking in Vietnam. So I mentioned the same like you mentioned, right? So the now
Yeah.
we are in the pressure of everything is change, right? We need faster, better, cheaper, more affordable, right? And more agile. A lot of things to change. So the question for why we need to invest in Lean Six Sigma, we never doubt on that, right? So it's very good. And you mentioned a lot of the thing that I see that the beautiful side of the Lean Six Sigma. But now we not read in the book, right? We meet you in person. So I love to ask you about the failures. We just learn from failure that we cannot read in the book, cannot read outside of that one, right? So I would like to ask you why Lean Six Sigma initiative fail. So why do so many high level Lean Six Sigma initiative lose momentum and fail? Why that?
So that's actually a great question. In fact, I've written expert answers on this particular topic. This question comes up very often. There are many ways a Lean Six Sigma project, a program as a program can fail. Obviously, if you don't have leadership support, that is a very obvious one. But there are more nuanced ones. Um, People who are passionate about the Lean Six Sigma, um, they would do a very stealth approach. Like, for example, they would implement the Lean Six Sigma at a shop floor level. Like implementing 5S, implementing Kanban, implementing certain visual management systems, um, uh, other lean tools like layouts changes and all those things, and Six Sigma also training people on that, on a green belt and yellow belts and doing those things. But they never probably got the wholehearted approval from the leadership on that. They were doing it at a very stealth level because they are worried that if they make it as a big program, it will be turned down by the leadership, and they're just quietly doing it. Maybe their intentions are good. I've seen organizations do that. The top leadership never know that there is a Lean Six Sigma program going on in their organization. It is at the quality function level they are doing this kind of initiatives. They want to build some momentum, build some pilot, and once they have enough success, they want to go tell the leadership about that. So that is a bottom up approach they are going. There is only a certain limit you can go from the bottom up. You have taken all the low hanging fruits. After that, the program has a ceiling. It cannot go any further because there is no leadership support to invest people time, resources, and priorities. All these are important to the organization, right? From the leadership point of view, what is that the organization need to work in terms of the priority, in terms of strategic direction, in terms of technology roadmap, right? They have a set of rules and guidance that they have for the organization to succeed. If the Lean Six Sigma program is not aligned on that, it is just about practicing the Lean Six Sigma tools and applications across the manufacturing floor, and producing small benefits out of that. Even if it is hundreds of thousands of dollars, it is still a small benefit compared to the strategic direction, where the organization would want to go. So if it is not aligned with the strategic direction where it is going, and it is just simply applying the Lean Six Sigma tools as a small projects, then it is likely to fail. So this is one pathway I've seen the failure. The other one is the the top management. The top management supports the Lean Six Sigma program. They want this program. They have reasonably resourced it, and the program is being implemented. But the leadership is not personally involved in the program. You know, so they are aware of it, they verbally support it, but not committed to the program. So that lack of commitment will cause the the Lean Six Sigma program. I read somewhere an interesting analogy where uh, your son or daughter wanted to learn tennis, right? So you buy them a tennis racket, you buy him a tennis ball, you put that person in a famous tennis academy to learn the tennis, you assign a coach, but when the match happens, you never show up as a parent. So the kid is not motivated to win. The kid is motivated to play, but not to win, right? So that is the same thing. When the leadership is resourcing a program, they have to be fully committed and they should be involved in the program and demonstrate a sense of ownership on that program. If that part is lacking, then the programs will fail. So that is another part. Then the third is overemphasis on tactical things, like the number of training conducted, the number of people trained, number of people trained, or number of projects initiated. So those are all interesting metrics for the organization. But what matters to the organization is how much cost of poor quality you have reduced, how much of cost of poor quality you have avoided, and how much of cash flow you have brought back to the organization. You need to link the results of these programs, any improvement program. It doesn't matter whether it is a Lean Six Sigma program or you do Hoshin, you do quality function deployment, any other activities, right? You need to link to the bottom line results that resonate. Bottom line results is not necessarily always money. It could be something that resonates with the leadership, right? In some of the high-tech organizations that I have worked, bottom line is eventually bottom line. It is all eventually bottom line. But what resonates with a certain audience is you are able to launch the new products on time, and at the so that the market share can be captured. So the speed of innovation is a big deal for some organization. For some organization, customer delight, net promoter score is very important for them. End of the day, all of that translates into revenue. It doesn't matter whatever you call it in a different metric, but what resonates with the people, you need to understand, and you need to position the projects on the understanding the internal culture of the organization. If you don't know that, then probably you are uh, what we can say is that you have an operational success and a strategic failure. So you performed a successful surgery, but you have a dead patient. So what is the point? Who is going to reward you for a successful surgery if you have a dead patient? So you need to make sure that the eventual what matters to the leadership, be it sustainability focus, or be it be it cash flow improvement, be it cost of poor quality reduction, which is in turn nothing but OPEX reduction, reducing the operational expenses. So you need to link it to the income statement, cash flow statement, and be able to demonstrate, the improvements that we did may move the needle in these major areas. You need to be able to say that. That is very important. People don't realize that. Unfortunately, quality functions and other functions within the organization, they present report to leadership. They have a 10-15 minutes attention span, for the leadership to go and present. They don't optimize that attention, by presenting the number of major audit findings, the number of minor audit findings. Here are my DPPM results and all those things. Okay, those are all operational minor things. When you go and talk to leader, you need to choose the words so carefully that even the fewer words that you can get through their mind in the short time frame, those are very important words that they can remember, very clearly. talk about how it has improved the customer retention, talk about how it has increased the speed of innovation, talk about how it has improved the supply chain resilience, like all these things that matters to them.
Yeah, super great, Govind. So during your sharing, I thought that you need to update your all of your handbook, right? So all of your sharing during last 30 minutes, we can update your handbook, and I think that we should do the examination to make sure that all of the students make sure that they learn by heart everything you share, right? So
Okay.
I need to summarize a little bit for the audience that they can
Yeah,
follow
yeah, go
you.
ahead.
Yeah,
Go
so
ahead. Mm,
real quick, so the question is very important. Why the Lean Six Sigma implementation and initiative failure, right? So thank you, Govind, for sharing of us a lot of things. So there are three kind of the main things. The first one you mentioned about the Lean strategy. That's why hosting country always important, right? The strategic deployment always important. The
I
second one,
agree completely.
yeah,
Mm,
yeah. So today I deployed the hosting country for the biggest corporation. So everybody
mm,
agree that. So the second one is the commitment and involvement for everybody, not only for the leadership, also for the sub level, everybody in the organization, right? And the last one you mentioned the tactical things, but a lot of things. So the tactical things, so it's come from the training, the cost of quality, the cash flow improvement program. You need to link the bottom line, right? So the bottom line is very important. And also you mentioned about the leadership. Especially you mentioned the key thing and the new thing that I share a lot of the organization right now is not only for the customer experience, but also for the customer delight. So the customer delight is a new thing in the organization world right now. And the last one is very important, right? It's not only for the corporate culture, but also for the communication. So communication is
yeah,
king for the thing, right? So it's very good. So this is the brief for the audience. So I know that they can get you. And now I saw that a lot of questions they put in the chat box, right? So the follow-up question based on that is, you and me are the master black belt, and we are human being, right? And we are very honestly, we also have the business, right? So, as your point of view, and during your last maybe a lot of experience for the Lean Six Sigma, so what's the biggest mistake made by the Lean Six Sigma master black belt or the black belt or the quality leader in the world right now?
well, I can't speak for the whole world, because I don't have an experience meeting so many of them, but I can tell from my own experience how I have evolved. I'm also human like you, like, so I made a number of mistakes along my career, and I made course corrections over time. So initially I enjoyed my statistical knowledge and my ability. So I was heavily focused. Even at vice president's meeting, I would go and present. This was, I'm talking about, like 20 years ago, not now. 20 years ago, um, I would go and present all my Minitab analysis results. With all the statistical inference and graphs and test of hypothesis and everything to show, hey, this is how I have applied my. So I was doing the right thing in a wrong way. That means the right thing is, I want to show that we have made a quality improvement. But at a vice president level, he doesn't care what kind of a statistical tool I use and what software I use or anything. So putting a slide after slide after slide on statistical Minitab analysis was absolutely, a crazy thing to do. But of course, they were, supporting my humor at that time. They were not too rude to me or anything at that time. But over the period, I realized how foolish I was. So I was enjoying to tell the people how good I am in my statistical capability. Like, I've learned so many things in statistics. I have applied all of that, in that program. Even sometimes some of the tools are not applicable. I would deliberately use them in that application just to show how good I am in my tool application. That was the early stages of my career, to show how good I am, so the emphasis was heavy on my tools and methodology and application, and making people aware that you are dealing with a knowledgeable person. That is where my emphasis was there. Unfortunately, it is not the right emphasis. Over time, with more knowledge, experience, and most importantly, wisdom, I pivoted into more focus into bottom line results. So it doesn't matter, as long as you have applied a structured approach, and it's a sustainable approach to producing the results. People don't care about what you do, on that. They are interested in the results. Did you take the right problem? How important is the problem in terms of strategic value for the organization? What is it going to solve? Is any of your stakeholder or your most important stakeholder, the customer, is going to benefit from the approach that you took, right? And here are the results, and how sustainable are that results? Are the results durable? Today the word used, terminology used, is called durable gains. That means it's not just a one-time gain and moved on, then the problem maybe reoccur or something. It is, did you eliminate the issue completely, and is it a durable gain throughout? So that those are the things people are concerned about. That is where the direction should be. In fact, when I was answering your last question, so I remembered, you saw in my bio, one of the technical committee, I was a convener. So that is exactly what I did with that. And that would be an interesting example to explain here. It's a standard called ISO 10014. Have anyone heard about it? ISO 10014 here in the audience? Probably not. Only a very few people who are in the know in the ISO standards probably will know. They know about 14,001. People always get confused by that. But there is a guideline to ISO 9000 series called 10,014, guidelines for realizing financial and economic benefits from quality management system requirements, right? If you think of it, why do people implement quality management system requirements? It's not to put a certificate on the wall, or not to feel personally, take a pride that they have achieved ISO 9001 certification, or some kind of a bragging rights. It is to realize the benefits for the organization, financial and economic benefits. That is why people implement quality management system, because they are able to streamline the process, connect the process end to end, integrate the process, and bring effectiveness and efficiency into the process. So that converts into bottom line results to the organization. That is the purpose of the QMS, right? It is not about having a certificate so that they have the eligibility to go do bidding for the customer contracts. That is not even though that is on the surface, it is an expectation, but the underlying expectation is that people implement ISO 9001 to realize financial and economic benefits. So this standard, ISO 10014, had existed since the late 90s. Then in 2006, it went through a revision. And the ISO technical committee, who are very passionate people and knowledgeable people, they revised that standard with a 40-page standard. And all of that flooded with the tools and flow charts, and each one of them take each of the quality principle from ISO 9000, and each principle converted into a flow chart. So what they were doing is basically they were demonstrating their knowledge and experience as a quality professional. But it is not the intent of the standard. The very first line in the standard is, this standard is intended for top management. That is the first sentence of the standard, actually. And they had all these quality tools and workflows and everything. You tell me who in the real world of chief executive officer and chief operational officer is going to read a 40-page document of standard filled with quality tools and flowcharts? Who is going to do that? No one is going to do that. So that standard was an example of successful surgery and a dead patient, basically, right? So when the opportunity came for a revision in 2017, I was fortunate to be given the opportunity to revise that standard. So many people encouraged me at that time just to do some minor updates, based on ISO 9001 2015 and publish it. Why are you wasting time or something like that? I didn't want to do that. I want to revise the standard from scratch, because this standard is addressed to top management. So you can't have this kind of a content that is inconsistent with what a top management would require. So we went to the drawing board with 15 other international experts. This was the expectation set. Okay, we need to bring value that demonstrates financial and economic benefits to the standard. It should resonate to the top leader, and it should have a very minimum. You know the top leaders, right? In any organization, be it a small business or a large corporation, they are inundated with issues, in their mind: how to pay the salary for their staff next month, how to grow the business, how to address this customer. They don't have all time to read a 40-page document. They have 15 minutes attention span to focus on what you're going to say. And can you provide a standard that they can read within 15 minutes and understand it? You don't want the chief executive to delegate the standard to a quality manager and say, you go read it and summarize it for me. They should be able to read it by themselves. Then you have a very successful standard. So the standard was totally revised end to end. So we brought down from 40 pages to 20 odd pages, but the main standard is only 2 page. Rest are all annex, the main standard, so that any executive can read a 2-page standard. Even in a short break time or in their coffee break, they can read it. So that is how it was redesigned. And the standard is linked to the organizational's balance sheet, income statement, and cash flow statement. From there, it starts. Okay. So if you want to do an improvement project, you start from there. How is your income statement and cash flow statement is doing? What is your OPEX? Where are your cash flow locked? Okay. Bring it down and say which processes are highly contributing to the OPEX reduction or cash flow locking. Then go one step down and do a PDCA and understand, what improvement need to be done on those processes that are clogging the cash flow or increasing the OPEX in terms of losses, OPEX expenses. And that gives you opportunity to identify where should be your projects. Now your project, similar to your Hoshin planning, you are linking directly to the things that matter to the leadership, on the strategic initiatives, on the technology roadmap, on the things that shows the financial health of the organization. So you can all take a look at that standard. It is available, ISO 10014 2021. Very useful standard. I am even surprised today because the very purpose of implementing the ISO 9001 is to realize financial and economic benefits. Yet no one knows about the existence of this standard.
Yeah, thank you, Govind. So I think that whenever I'm talking with you, so the time flies. So it's past 45 minutes very quickly. And when you share about your failures, your mistakes, so I think that is from your bottom heart, right? So it's mean that you do a lot of project, you do a lot of things. So the man who have a lot of mistakes, a lot of failures, it means that you do a lot in the past. I do believe that you do a lot in the past. So I have a quickly summarize for the audience. So based on Govind sharing, so we can learn a lot of mistake. It's come from the tools, the way you approach, right? And you need to do everything is super lean. It's very simple, right? Short and concise, right? And you see that Govind also sharing about the standard, right? We cannot provide the 40 pages to the C level, right? And very short and concise, very simple, and easily to understand and remember, right? The last one is minimalism. So it's a lean way, right? We put the lean into our blood, right? So keep it in the blood, right? So I thank you, Govind. You sharing a lot about ISO 9001, right? So my question is, so is ISO 9001 still relevant because it's maybe 20 years ago, and we do know that as a member leader of ASQ, right? So we have a big team to revise the ISO 9001 into the new standard maybe this year or next year. The quality works, the quality professional waiting us for a long time to have the new revision. So my question for you is, after maybe 20 years and a lot of revisions, so does ISO 9001 still matter in 2026?
Yeah, absolutely. The answer is yes. So the new the final draft is expected this month. Actually, ISO 9001 2026. The final draft is expected this month, and the published standard will be expected is expected in September of this year. So there are not, to my knowledge, because I was involved in the draft commenting, there is not too many changes that is happening from the ISO 9001 2015 to 2026. There are a few changes, very important changes though. Previously, which was an amendment, which is the climate change. So in I might go on technical here, just if your audience get a little bit lost, I can explain to them. So in the section 4 on context of the organization, there is previously last year an amendment was added. Now it is a final requirement, which is organizations have to determine whether climate change is relevant to their organization. So this addition was added based on a London declaration at ISO, and this was required for many ISO standards, and ISO 9001 being one of the most, not one of the, actually the most popular standard among the ISO 9001 series, with 1.4 million organizations implementation throughout the world. So the ISO organization felt it is important the emphasis of climate change should be in the ISO 9001. Many people resisted that. They didn't like the idea of including a climate change in a quality management system requirements, but still it was added into the standard. But you need to see it in the context of quality management system requirement. If environmental expectations and regulations or requirements that are stakeholder requirements for your, so it becomes a broader business management system requirements and quality management system requirements. You should see it in that way and not necessarily think, oh, that's the environmental thing, it's ISO 14001, nothing to do with ISO 9001. We shouldn't look that way. And even the way how a product or process are designed, it can become excessive energy consuming product or excessive resource consuming product. Like take, for example, like data centers, right? If you don't design the data centers very effectively, it can take quite a lot of energy. With the artificial intelligence driven market, the servers are facing a lot of energy spikes and demands, and which would heat up all the electronic components which are in the server. So those need to be cooled. So it would require quite a lot of resources in terms of energy and water in order to address those situations. So how might you design your product in order to consume less energy and consume less resources like water, right? So those are, you cannot separate them from a quality management system requirement and say, no, those are energy requirement. We don't want to do that, right? So it is integral to that. The climate change related requirements are integral to the quality management system requirement. So that is added to 4.1, and 4.2 is what are the climate change related requirements of your stakeholders. Maybe the regulating body, maybe the banker who is financing for the projects have a climate change related requirements, right? The community that you operate has a climate change related requirements, because you don't want to exhaust the water, you don't want to overuse the energy. So these are some of the changes that are coming in 4.1 and 4.2. Then on the leadership and on the training is ethical behavior. So there is a lot of even though ISO 9001 is one of the very important and a foundational standard that existed since late 80s, right? It has gone through so many revisions, as you pointed out, and continue to improve the standard. But still, the standard is only as good as the people who apply it, right? You can misuse any standard. You can apply it superficially just for getting the certificate. You don't necessarily address the requirement to the intent what the standard is looking for. So auditors can be careless with the with verifying those standards. All this can affect the brand integrity of ISO 9001 as the most popular quality management system standard in the world. So there need to be an ethical component to that. How you apply quality management system requirements and how you do a business. There are ethics aspects of it, and including now the application of artificial intelligence in the business increases the reason for why ethics are important in an organization. If you are developing an artificial intelligence model which is skewed, biased, and producing incorrect results, so there is an ethical violation. So you didn't follow the AI code of ethics there, right? So ethics becomes an important part of the business, and that has been added to the both leadership and training. And quality culture. So organization need to demonstrate that they have a quality culture. So this would open up a lot of opportunity for organization to revisit on the quality culture. There is also a standard on quality culture. Many of you, if you have not heard about it, there is a ISO 10010 guideline on how to implement quality culture in an organization. You can take a look at it and read it. So that is a useful standard. You can do a baseline cultural assessment, understand the gaps, and set up a goal on where your culture need to be in order to produce optimal results. Then you can take improvement actions to build those culture. Culture cannot be built overnight, so it takes time. It takes a strong leadership. They have to walk the walk and talk the talk in order to have the culture built. So there are many aspects of cultural traits that the organization need to put in place in order to uh, have the necessary culture for success of the organization. So that is added to the leadership and training portion. And finally, the one that I can say is of important is that the management of change. So change management and management of change. People always use this interchangeably. Management of change is the process how you get the change done. Like you initiate a change, you identify the justification for the change, you identify who are the stakeholders for the change, and you put together how do you plan for the change, how do you execute the change, and how do you verify the effectiveness of the change, and how do you expand the rollout of the change across the organization. That is the management of the change. The change management, however, has the human element. You can have an excellent process for the change on paper, but if people don't buy into your change is dead on arrival, right on the paper. It will be sitting there in the paper and no one will adopt it. So do not underestimate the value of human behavior on a change, implementation of the change. So you have to have the stakeholder understand who the stakeholders are, what their requirements are, and you are able to get the buy-in from your stakeholder for the change before you can roll out the change. You can't just toss the change and expect people to pick it up and run with it. Maybe you can have a minimal initial success because of the authority that you have in that particular area. It will appear as if the change has been adopted, but it will just fall apart very soon if people have not wholeheartedly bought the change. So you need to, the human element of the change management is the most important part of it. So that aspects, all these are connected. Now the ISO talks about those aspects of it in that. So these are the changes that are made to the ISO 9001 2026. And I think all of these are very important changes where the industry is going, where the business environment is evolving. So to answer your question, it is still relevant, but end of the day, it depends on how the organization applies it. If they see the value of the ISO 9001 and apply it to its intent, they will get the benefit of it. If they just apply just enough to get a certificate so that they can put it into the bidding power process, only they will have that kind of a benefit there, that nothing else, right? What I would say, though, one addition I would do is people who have implemented ISO 9001, so yeah, you implemented ISO 9001 effectively, your system is working. So what next? They just, stop right there, and they don't know where to go from there, or they just are saturated at that point. So those people who have been successful in implementing ISO 9001, they can take a look at the ISO 9004, which is the quality of the organization itself. It has got a maturity scale, so they can take a look at their organization using the 9004. 9004 is not a requirement document, it is a guideline. but it is a very, very useful document. So they can assess their organization based on the level and maturity of the quality management system implementation, and they can get from level 1 to level 5 by self-assessment, through that. So it is a very important and very useful document. I would recommend for people who are saturated at 9001 to go, what next? If you don't know the answer, 9004 is the next. Or maybe you can look at the CMMI, CMMI, Capability Maturity Model Integrated. Now it is in version 3. You can look at it, and that's another opportunity to expand. So don't be stagnated. Keep evolving in what you implement. This is not. I'm not saying this to keep all the quality people busy in the organization and make them feel important or relevant. You need to produce results. You can't just introduce a program to keep yourself busy. It need to have an organizational and strategic value to the organization.
Yeah, thank you, Govind, a lot. So you share a lot of information for us. So I see that you keep talking for nearly 1 hour, but a lot of energy, And I see that the attendance give you a lot of heart, right? A lot of like and a lot of big hand, right? So it's a recognition from the audience for you. So thank you a lot for Govind for sharing. So I have a quickly briefing. So for the audience, you know that we are very lucky, right? So we know it's very early because it's a final draft for this month, and maybe we have the issue in September 2026, right? So we are very early birds, right? I can say that we are super early bird. So Govind and I, we are in the member leaders. We can update all of the information related to ISO. But you guys here is very super early us, but to know that, right? So maybe we have 6 months in advance to know the new standard, and you can have the web prepared for that. So I have quickly for some highlight point that Govind mentioned for the new ISO 2026. This is a very, very useful standard, right? And as Govind said, it's a very useful and helpful for you guys, especially you are the business owner, you're the leadership and management team, right? The first one is the climate change. So it's very important. So the second one is we have more than 1.4 millions of organizations apply ISO 9001 already. So it's more and more in the future. And for the climate change, we focus on the energy, not only for oil, but also for the water, because the AI consume a lot of water. And we mentioned about the application AI in the business. It's very important. So it's a key point. So one of the things we take a lot of time to review and revise the ISO standard is we can rethinking and how can we put in the consideration very carefully for the application AI in the business. And also we mentioned about the ethics, so it's very, very important, right? It's important always, but now day by day, especially with AI, ethics goal is more important. And also for the quality culture, right? For the leadership and training. So for sure that the quality culture is the last point for the quality. We need to build culture. And thanks Govind again for the lecturing today. We learned about the management of change and the change management. So a lot of people they have the big confusing in the management of change and the change management. So a lot of people think that they're the same. But in our class, especially in my class, I always share that it's a different and totally different, right? And the way to approach is different. And when we translate into Vietnamese, it's the same meaning, right? So that's why people get confusing. And I share with you that especially for the American, when they do the test in Lean Six Sigma for the yellow belt, green belt, black belt, they will do the wrong thing because they see that it's the same. They think it's the same. And we need to pay attention to the human behaviors. And time changing, right? Everything change, but we still working with the people and the human. And human behavior is one thing; it's not change, right? Today I would also share with the maybe more than 50 leaders in the bank. So I said that everything will change, but if you working with the people, the human behavior is still there, right? And
Oh,
especially
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, and especially we also mentioned about the what next, right? And you and me are the expert in ISO, and I'm also the lead auditor of ISO 9000. So people just think about 9001, but people never talking or very less time into talking about 9004, right?
Yep.
So 9004 is the super useful guideline, especially focused on the quality of organization. And we mentioned about the self-assessment from level 1 to 5. People always, people always ask me, John, do you have any template? you have any document to do the self-assessment. I say, 9004, they have the very useful guideline out there.
Mm.
So just implement that, right? And the last one, thank you for mentioning about CMMI. I think that is a very new term for all of us here, right? All of the audience here. So for you guys, so you never know about CMMI. It stands for the capability, maturity, model integrated, right? So as Govind mentioned, it's a version 3. So Govind provide you, the ton of knowledge, the ton of information, So I feel that people today and the audience today, they look like they receive the information, look like the fire horse, you the fire horse to put the water in the mouth.
Yeah.
So but
Yeah,
it's
take it little by little, take it little by
yeah,
little. You don't need to, you know, observe everything at one time. Take one at a time and process it. And um, um, I'm providing so much information because the time is short, and I want to optimize as much information as possible to the team. You know, one thing, John, when we were talking about the management of change and change management is important, is that you know change management skills is a very, very underestimated skills in every organization, or underestimated process. you know People focus on more attractive things, that make them visible and success to the team, leadership, like, okay, you have to be in the design and development because you get attention of the R&D vice president, and you have to be in head of operations to be have the attention of CEO and COO and those people, right? But they don't people don't understand the importance of a change agent in an organization, to who is helpful in managing successful change, you know uh, uh, through the process of a disciplined process of planning the change, executing the change, and verifying the effectiveness of the change, and closing the loop on the learnings made from that change through the change database, so that they don't repeat the same errors that they made in the past changes, right? So that discipline is very important, plus bringing the people together and getting their buy-in, and wholeheartedly embracing the change that improves the adoption. uh, and the people, generally organizations have underestimated this aspect of the business. That is why there is a McKinsey report that provides statistics. 70% of the change initiated by any organization fail right off the bat because they don't pay attention to this. 70%. Imagine the amount of cost wasted by the organizations and opportunities lost, because the change could not be realized. So that is why, if you are going to be an evolving quality leader or a quality business professional, you need to strengthen your ability to managing the change and deploying successful changes. That should be one of your main attribute in terms of skill. If you have to sell, what is that you bring to the table? I can make successful changes in an organization. That is a very, very important skill to have.
yeah, great. When you mentioned about the change management is underestimate, I do agree with you. But the change management topic is the most training course that I provide to our clients. And I always start with a new consulting project with the change management. But if people don't have the good mindset in the change management, everything later on it will be fail, right? And the second one, when you mentioned that while you're talking real fast, right? So in the Zoom right now, there's a lot of my students, and they do know that I also speak very fast. So now you know that it's not only me, right? And we have another guy talking very fast because of the time limited, right? A lot of knowledge, and we're very inspiration. We're very motivational that we need to give you transfer a lot of knowledge to you. And the last one is not your fault, right? Today you listen about two experts and two operational excellence master black belt talking. So a lot of terminology, a lot of framework, a lot of methodology, a lot of things. So I do believe that after 1.5 hours, you need maybe 1 month to absorb it. And you need one month or later on for digest all the information, right? But it's good because we need to pick up the brand inside the brand of Govind, you see. So he has a lot of knowledge, so he's a guru expert. Yeah.
So, John,
So
may I ask you something? Once you complete the recording of this session, there's the whole session, an hour and a half session, I can understand maybe many of your audience, as you said, right? They may not be fluent in English, or they may not be able to catch all the insights because we are speaking too fast. I try to train myself. That is one of the skill that I have to continually improve, and I have not been successful. Is to speak a little bit slower. 140 words per minute is what people can understand, the one that I am speaking now, right? So, but when you get caught up on the subject and you are very passionate about the subject, you lose control. You tend to speak fast, go back to your old habits of speaking faster, right? So I took help from one of the communication coach to train myself, but I need to train myself. So the coach suggested that to have a pink color sticky notes, or something that will remind me every time I look at it. I need to bring down the speed. It's a mental cue for me to look at it and bring down the speed, or having something with the sense of smell, like a lavender or something, that when I move my hand, when I smell it, immediately I know I need to bring my speed down, right? So I'm working on it. But for the benefit of your audience, what you could potentially do is, once you have recorded the session, you can play it with a slower speed, which is those features are now available. Play it at 0.75, zero point 0.5 speed or something. You can do that. Um,
Yeah.
then you can also get one of your team member who is good with both English and Vietnamese to actually voice dub it to a Vietnamese, or to have a Vietnamese transcript available for them. It'll be helpful for them as well.
Yeah, thank you a lot for your very carefully caring for us. So, don't worry, our student, they always change to 1.5 or 2x for listening. They learn so fast. And you guys, for the audience, that when the Six Sigma learn the public speaking, you see, right? He counts how many words they said, right? Robin, you know that a lot of people here, they attend the public speaking in my class. So I teach them how to speak, how to control the speed, how to control the voice. And
Mhm.
you know how to speak slowly. It's a 140 words, right? And also you use the smell to train your physical body, right? To train your muscle, right? It's you need when you smell the lavender, right? You need to speak slowly, right? Okay. Or you
Yes. Yeah.
yeah. Or you don't need to smell lavender. You can put your wife picture. So it helps you be calm and speak slowly.
Mm, mm.
Yeah, just kidding because
I'll take that cue next. Next, that's also a list of good ideas.
okay,
So yeah,
but keep your
proceed.
confidence. Don't be scared.
Mm,
But it's a human being when we so excited and we in front of the very excited people, excited audience, right? We speak too fast.
yeah,
It's normal, right? But
yeah,
keep your pace because when you speak too fast, your brain. I know that your brain. You are very smart, and you have a lot of things inside your brain. So that's why you need to speak out so fast to keep your pace, right? So
yeah.
it's very
The
very
thing is,
nice.
John, like even for you or me, right? English is not our first language,
I
right?
know.
So I think in my native language, and the internal processor converts into English. So when your native language is very fast, then the English becomes fast, right? Same with Vietnamese, right? So you think in Vietnamese and speak in English, so you are mimicking the same speed and the variation when you are speaking English.
Yeah.
So that happens to many of us who when English is not our first language, right? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so thank you for your sharing. So, once again, you give on up the audience here one more confidence that you see that Govind, he very honestly, you see, he are the expert and you see he keep learning. You see, he wear the jacket for Stanford business. So he keeps learning, keep sharing, and very honestly, you see, the people who not in the first language, not in the mother tongue in English, also can be the global expert, right? So what they need from you guys is from your brain, not from your tongue, right? All of us have an accent, especially for the Americans. So don't worry about that. Keep your knowledge in your brain, right? So thank you, Govind, again for your sharing a lot of knowledge, a lot of information for us. And now it's a new challenge for you. Now we need to practice right away. You know, I'm the coach, so I need to coach you right away. Now you can have a new challenge. You can answer my question in 30 seconds. Okay.
Mhm.
So if the executive people come to ask you, so has ISO maybe 9001 become more about compliance or than performance? So what is your answer in 30 seconds, please?
There is upper time limit also, is that right? The intents, see, there is a difference between compliance and conformance, John. ISO 9001 is a voluntary standard, so it is about conformance. When you have a regulatory requirement, it is a compliance. So there is a difference between the terminology on compliance and conformance, right?
Yeah, so sorry
So
to interrupt you, but what is the question? Focus on they wonder about the compliance or the performance because operational excellence or lean system we
yeah,
more focus on the performance, but ISO more focus on the compliance. So that's their concerns.
So the initial intent of the ISO 9001 is conformance, right? Conformance to requirement. However, there are opportunities within the ISO 9001 on continual improvement, right? So you can have innovation, you can have continual improvement, you can have, maturity improvement within the organization, all that are possible as a building blocks. So if you just limit yourself to conformance to requirements, you are stagnated. That means you are underutilizing the capability of an ISO 9001 standard. But if you understood the intent of the ISO 9001, then you go beyond the conformance and demonstrate performance improvement, demonstrate maturity improvement, resiliency and robustness, and all those things on top of that. So um, you need, in 30 seconds, you need the user need to understand the intent is not just limited to conformance.
Yeah, thank you. So now you are a very good student now. Okay, okay, just kidding. So maybe it's a quick question, a quick answer. So now is the next question. So you have more time to answer because I and our audience here very would like to learn from you. So we also know that you are working in the very big tech company, right? And
Mhm.
this is the future focus in the question. Now it's a trending for AI, right? Artificial intelligence. So my very straightforward question for you is, you and me also a Lean Six Sigma expert. So will AI replace Lean Six Sigma expert, especially black belt or master black belt, or redefine their role in the future?
Yeah, it will not replace. There is always a need for a human element, right? You can't just run a Six Sigma project with a AI agent, right? So there is always a need for human to understand the nuances. However sophisticated artificial intelligence become, there is always going to be context. So like how the realtors say location, location, location. In artificial intelligence, context, it matters. So the artificial intelligence, um, at least for the time being, until it becomes a AGI or whatever it is in the future, from the current maturity where it is, um, uh, you need context in order for the artificial intelligence to understand the prompt very clearly and be able to produce the results. That context is provided by the human, and the human has the level of intelligence. So even though all the statistical skills and other skills will not be as important as it was before, but the context of the problem and what are all the nuances in terms of cultural changes and the people emotions and understanding specific stakeholder expectations and all those things are with the human. So that aspect of the Lean Six Sigma cannot be taken away from the people. That will be still remaining there. So it would be a very good combination of a human and artificial intelligence capability that brings the high performance in the next generation.
Yeah, very nice. So for sure that in the future that the Lean Six Sigma expert, right, especially black belt or master black belt can for sure that they can combine AI, but not only for can it's a must use for the AI tool, right, and it helps us a lot.
Yeah.
It's very nice. So maybe I ask you about the one of the question in your expert is the cost of quality, right? So
Mhm.
how can you as a quality expert define the cost of quality in the today digital and data driven environment?
Yeah. So in the artificial intelligence, it depends on machine learning, and machine learning depends on what data that you are going to train the machine learning with, right? So you have real data with real complexities that are available to train, but at the same time, people are creating, because there are not enough real data for edge cases and other nuanced cultural and emotional aspects of geographies. People create synthetic data, so that is a large business of people creating synthetic data using algorithm, right? So if the data is not reflective of the context or the environment where you are trying to draw the inference, then the results are not going to be what is expected. So even though artificial intelligence is an algorithm that provides you the results more efficiently, or the results optimally what you wanted, so it may not be always right. It has to because it was not trained data that is that is reflective of the context and the environment. Maybe the data is biased towards one or more direction, in terms of people thoughts or regional skewness or something like that. So it may not produce the real results. So if you train the AI algorithm towards the North American cultural context and try to apply in Vietnam, it won't work, right? So there, the cultural context and people thinking are different. Um, so many countries are now adopting their own, internal data to train, for machine learning. That is the reason, Um, so that irrelevance from the data producing the result is going to cost the company cost of poor quality, in the modern world. So those days of, repair, rework, refurbish, and all those things, the traditional prevention, appraisal, and failure, those things remain. The framework remains the same. However, there will be new components added because of the artificial intelligence use. Say, having a digital twin to simulate the environment before you can apply it, that is going to be a prevention cost, building the cost of building a digital twin and simulation, because it prevents actually building something and realizing the failure. You are able to simulate it and see it, right? So that would become a prevention cost, right? Appraisal cost is testing, through the testing the algorithm to see whether the results are producing consistently, is the appraisal cost. Failure cost is the incorrect results or hallucinations, from the algorithm. What is the cost of those? That is costing customer business and incorrect decisions that the organizations make. So the framework remains same. The cost of quality components are going to be added to this list.
Yeah, thank you, Govind, for the explanation for the cost of quality. So I know that it's not easy to understand, right? And especially for the audience here, so it's a new term, right? And the cost of quality, the cost of perfection is very important. And thank you again for the explanation for how can we link the cost of quality in AI, right? And also in the data driven, and also for the new world right now. Thank you again. And Govind, I received a very nice question from the audience, because you and me also in the Asian culture, right? So the question is very interesting. So in the fast growing companies look like in Vietnam, or you can mention in India, because we look like a similar culture, Asian one. So how can you
Yeah.
balance the speed up execution with the discipline required by Lean Six Sigma?
So you need discipline, like a structured approach, or else your decisions are not sustainable. So it is not one or other. Basically you can't have a multiple choice between either you choose this or that. So you need the disciplined structure of the Lean Six Sigma, in order to make an improvement or solve a problem. That is non-negotiable. So now the speed is a component that is required in the new business, right? You can't take your own speed time, like, okay, I follow the structure, I follow the DMAIC principles, I get to my result. The results are sustainable, but it takes a quite long time to get there. So that is not would not meet the business demands. So how would you add the speed component of it, right? So in order to add the speed component, you need to understand the risks in your processes. What are all the, because the speed is is impacted by not understanding the underlying risks within that. Right? If you want to launch, say for example, I want to create, launch a new program, or implement a new data center, in a particular region. I want to do it fast, but I don't understand any of the risks. So it makes no sense, because these risks are going to realize at some point of time and going to push that, the timeline. You are not able to achieve the goal of the speed. So understanding the underlying risks, the risk-based thinking, again, part of the ISO 9001, people just superficially read it. But if you read it with the real intent, that means you understand the risks, not and the opportunities within the given business management system, and you take enough mitigation plans and management plans in order to anticipate and react to those risks, or even reduce the severity of the risks. That helps you to improve the speed. So you have to think from the point of not just from the effective execution of a disciplined approach, also the other attributes that helps you to achieve in terms of speed, robustness, resilience, scalability. All these are big terms now.
Yeah, thank you, Govind, for sharing. So I do believe that with the expert in ASQ, look like you and me, right? So we have the background culture is Asian, so we can understand easily how can Asian company can grow, right? And especially it's quite different between the Asian and also the Western style and also the American style. So thank you a lot for your sharing. So you know that the time flies, so we have 5 minutes left. So I would like to ask you the last question, right?
Mhm.
So before we ending, so if I can ask you real quick about what are your top three recommendations for the CEOs or for the quality or lean system professional today to be successful in the future? So what are they?
So I have my own thought process on that. You know people always create a strategy for quality, like in an organization. So one time it was a very big eye opener for myself when I attended a ASQ World Conference, and I listened to one of the quality guru, Greg Watson, you know, pivoting from strategy for quality to quality as a strategy itself. Thinking about people don't think like that. Quality is a strategy for your organization. If you're not shipping good products on time, or providing the services at the highest quality, you are going to lose your customer base, and which is going to impact your market share and your overall revenue and bottom line of the organization. So the quality should be an integral part of your strategy itself. You are not trying to come up with the strategy for quality. Quality itself is a strategy for you. So that is one thought process. Then the other one is, um, if you if you begin and end with customer in anything that you do, you can never go wrong. As simple as that. Even though it looks like a very cliche, that kind of a statement, but it has got a very profound meaning to it. When you are starting a business, or thinking about developing a process, or revising an existing process that you have in your organization, you think about your customer. What would a customer and other key stakeholders and interested party would want in this process? And you design that upfront in the process, quality at the source. Then once you complete the process, again think about the customer and say, how would the customer experience this process? What are their pain points? What would be their experience, right? So that is an end-to-end customer experience, realizing. I don't know whether your audience or yourself have gone through this uh, customer journey mapping. Have you heard about it?
Yes, so we
So
did a lot. And the
yeah,
audience
so
here, we have some CX expert here, so they do a lot of customer journey.
that is a very important thing, customer
Yeah.
journey mapping. you are putting yourself in the customer's shoes and walking through end-to-end process, experiencing as if a customer would experience that process. So you are not just typing a process or developing a process and just putting it in a Word document and publishing it and say, let the stakeholders and customers go figure it out and give me all those things. But you are learning and the important aspect of the design thinking, you have a customer empathy. You empathize yourself, putting yourself in the customer shoes, and you experience through the process. That makes you a better process developer and a product developer, rather than just tossing out something. So that is a starting and think about the customer at the start and the end of the whole thing. The entire value stream that you design. So that is the second aspect. The third one, which I have my own, the third principle that by which I operate is think like a CEO. We all are not CEO for organizations. Maybe I'm at the middle management for a very, very large corporation. I'm not a CEO, but I can make a decision as if I am a CEO, right? As if I am the owner of the organization. If this were your own organization or the CEO where the buck ends, would you make this decision? Putting yourself in that shoe and making that thought process brings a lot more clarity and responsibility and accountability to your decision making process. Putting that hat and thinking like that. Case in point, right? You are a quality professional, and the company has a lot of economic issues, challenges. You have a very thin bottom line profit margin to grow, and a lot of competition in that market. And you, as a quality professional, with the company doesn't have quite a lot of revenue, you go to your chief executive and say, if only you got this enterprise application QMS software for $1 million, I can do a better job, or else I can't do anything. That is irresponsible. That means you are being blind about the whole. When company is struggling to make money, and the bottom lines are minimal and competition is high, you need to think like a CEO. What is the most scrappy way for you to do things with very minimal risk and benefit the organization, right? So that should be your thinking process. Like, that is called an example of thinking like a CEO. If you are a quality professional, if you're an engineer, process engineer, if you're a design engineer, all that it applies. You put that hat and think, what would a CEO do in this point? So that makes you more accountable for your decision and bias for actions. So these are the three things I try to follow.
Yeah, great. Thank you for three recommendations. It's very useful for us. So I can summarize real quick for you guys for the takeaway, right? The first one is the strategy. So quality is there itself strategy, right? You don't need to find more. So quality is a king. The second one is customer. So as Govind mentioned, you can design the customer journey from beginning and end. So for sure that the customer is a thing we focus in the Lean Six Sigma, right? We do everything customer willing to pay. That create the value added to us, right? And especially, Govind, you mentioned the thing that I share a lot for my student and my customer, that you always and you must put your empathy and sympathy to your customer. If you don't have any empathy or sympathy, it's nothing, right? And right now in the new world for the business, right? So that's why the EQ and the AQ is more important than the IQ, right? Emotional intelligence, right? So that's why empathy, sympathy again. Thank you for your sharing and remind us again. And the last one for sure, that the thing like the CEO or the owner, right? Put into their shoe, put into their head, and you can think what they think. And one day you can become the CEO. And Govind, right here, we have a lot of CEO in the room right now, right? And we have a lot of C-level in the room right now. So again, thank you a lot for 1.5 hour. Time fly real quick, right? So I have the final structure summarized today. So thank you, Govind. So today we go through for the very quick process, right? From the evolution, from the failures, from the measurement, from the standards, from the AI, from the future. So thank you, Govind. You share with us for very strategic very practical, very controversial, and actionable, right? So for sure that we are here, we are the CEO, the C-level, the professional, the practitioner audience. We learn a lot from you guys. So again, thank you a lot, Govind.
Well, I want to thank you, John, for hosting this podcast. I know you are very persistent with me trying to get this podcast done. The rest of the audience may not know how persistent John was. He was, contacting me on a very regular frequency to make sure this podcast happened. I kept moving up month after month because of my other presentation conflicts. So, but finally, I'm glad we are able to get this done today. Thank you, John, for making it happen. And very wonderful audience. I don't know many of the audience, but the way that they reacted when they heard something that resonated to their mind, with the emojis and also the kind of questions that they posted, that shows their interest, passion, and their ambition to grow, to become a productive, professional in their career, right? So this is not the end of it. We will have another opportunity to meet in a different topic in the future. But one thing I would request the audience here is that once John takes the screenshot of all of us and he posts in LinkedIn, he's very big on LinkedIn, John, all of you, please do go and write your thoughts and your comments and reactions into that post so that more people know that this is a very valuable podcast that John had arranged, and everyone should benefit in the series when he I think he has a next speaker, also a very well-known speaker. John is able to influential to be able to get another big speaker. He's doing all the right things for the community to get all the right people and arrange this podcast. So let's make this podcast series a success by you going and weighing in into the LinkedIn and writing, as many comments as possible. Be constructive. I'm not saying you have to say only nice things about me or John, but be constructive. So that will help to improve the traffic on the LinkedIn, and more people will pay attention to this. So, and thank you all for your time. This is very late in Vietnam, but only when you are passionate you are able to stay awake and listen to these kind of things. That demonstrates quite a lot to me.
Yeah, thank you, Govind, again, and very, very honor for us. So you very carefully, and it's the way for the professional one, right? And you sharing the one thing is very important. Is a feedback is a gift. So you guys here for the audience, you can put the feedback in the chat box, and also you can share on LinkedIn, and you can put Govind as a name for the feedback that you learn from this session. So again, thank you a lot for host for live and the big hand for Govind, right? We as a John&Partners, we driven for by excellence and for excellence. So we always bring the best of the best in the world for not only for the clients but also for the community, right? So the best of the best we learn from the gurus to shorten the knowledge, right? Shorten the gap. Now it's the morning time in California, right? And we nearly in the morning time in Vietnam. So and the audience right here not only for Vietnam but also for American. I see some guy from Australia, some guy from Cambodia, from India, from a lot of worlds, and from uh, some guy in Middle East right here. So it's look like the whole world in the Zoom right now. And after that, we can share the knowledge. So for sure that the people will get a lot of benefit from you guys. So not only you go with a lot of people drink coffee today because it's late night in Vietnam, and people just finished about the very hard work for the Friday, and still learning. So the learning culture, the learning, the mindset, the learning spirit, always learning. And look like you, so you also learning. So we for sure that we need to learn, keep going learning, and it's a lifelong learning. Thank you, Govind. Thank you, everyone again, and see you the next time in Hospital for the next show. As Govind mentioned, the big guest will come in, and also the big friend of Govind and I. Okay, so thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Good
Govind.
night.
Good job, bro.
Bye. Thanks, John.
Good job, my
Bye.
friend. Bye bye. See you then.